Welcome to this meeting of the West of England Combined Authority Audit Committee. My name is Tim Milgate. I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and I will be opening the meeting up until a new chair for this municipal year has been chosen. The first item on the agenda is committee membership and apologies for absence. There are two new members on the committee. Councillor Drew has replaced Councillor Rush, and Councillor Blake has replaced Councillor Emily Clark. There's two apologies for absence. Councillor Williams has sent apologies, and Councillor Coombs is here as his sub, and Mark Hatcliffe has sent apologies. He's one of our independent members. Item 2 is election of chair for municipal year 2026-27. Do I have any candidates who wish to put themselves forward? Okay, we have a Councillor Wilcox has indicated he wishes to put himself forward. Is there a proposer for that? Councillor Simon, is there a seconder? Councillor Leach and Councillor Hucker have indicated. Are there any other candidates who wish to put themselves forward? In that case, is the nomination of Councillor Wilcox for chair carried? If we can have a show of hands. And that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Just get myself sat down. So thank you very much for appointing me chair. Let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is election of the vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I would like to nominate.
Thank you very much, and I will second that, please. Can we have a vote of assent for Councillor Simon's appointment, please? Show of hands. Thank you very much. And congratulations, Councillor Simon. Before we start the bulk of the meeting, can we do a round of introductions so that we can start things off? So my name is Councillor David Wilcox, representing Localism in the fine city and county of Bristol. If we go round for councillors, please.
Thank you. Good morning. Councillor Jonathan Hacker, I represent Stockwood Ward in Bristol.
Councillor Toby Simon, Bathwick Ward, Bath and North East Somerset.
Councillor Mike Drew, representing Yate North in South Gloucestershire.
Nicholas Coombs of Westbury and Henleys in Bristol.
Councillor Tom Blenkinsop, Avonmouth and Lawrence Weston, Bristol.
Councillor Sibusisho Shabalala, Central Ward.
Hi, Jennifer Whitten, independent member.
John Leach, Councillor Bath and North East Somerset.
Thank you very much. Now let's do off. Oh.
Councillor Dave Addison, South Gloucestershire, Stoke Gifford Ward.
Good morning, committee. Pete Barber, Grant Thornton, your appointed auditor.
Sophie Morgan Bauer, senior audit manager at Grant Thornton.
Peter Kahn, head of internal audit.
James Kinane Nealon, head of finance.
Steve Finnegan, financial accountant.
Tim Milgate, Democratic Services.
Solange Russell, director of finance.
Bob Brown, director of law and governance.
Thank you very much, and that's the microphone test completed. So let's move on to item 5, which is minutes of the meeting held on March the 2nd, 2026. And oh, certainly. Yes, sorry, I've missed out an item. Would anybody like to make any declarations of interest under the Localism Act 2011, please? No, I think we're all good there, Solange. Thank you. Now let's move on to item 5, the minutes of the meeting held on 2nd of March 2026 and the 27th of April. Do anybody have any questions they'd like to raise about the minutes, please? No, I think we can take the minutes as taken then, please. Do we need a vote on that, Tim? No, just a note.
Apologies, I'll put the mic on. Chair, the committee's been asked to agree the minutes as correct record.
Right, thank you very much. Just a nod of heads then, please, would be fine. And then we move on to item 6, the terms of reference. The terms of reference for this committee was agreed at the authority's annual general meeting on the 5th of June 2026. We're asked to note that it's terms of reference. So I recommend that people do read the paper that's associated with this and the fact that they were agreed by the unitary authority leaders and the mayor on the 5th of June. So that one's another one for noting. So nod of heads, please.
Excuse me, Chair. Sorry.
Certainly, Councillor Shabalala.
Thanks. If I may, whilst understanding that this is worth for noting, I think we had an ongoing discussion about the terms of reference, and there's some points here that don't seem to be clear compared to where we left the discussion. And one of those was about the independent chair's role and the independent member's role as the opportunity for them to chair or not. I just don't see how that's been explicitly mentioned here. And I think that would be a good point to get some clarification on the decision making, because that seems to have gone past this committee's discussions. That's A. B, I think whilst these terms of reference have been amended, we could also look at chairs and vice chairs' role, because nominating chairs and vice chair every year just seems a bit ridiculous. So just to have a very clear 2-year term or whatever it may be, just so there's some clear continuity within things, I think that would be quite amicable to actually also do. I'll just raise those 2 points for now.
Okay, just happy to pick up a couple of issues there. So the feedback from this committee was that they weren't seeking an independent chair. That was accepted by the committee, and therefore the elected chair that you have at the moment, and we've not moved to an independent chair for the audit committee. So a political appointee can be made. So your feedback on that basis was taken on board by the committee when they approved the new terms of reference. So that remains as it was previously. The second issue, which was the voting in of chairs, because of the nature of the organisation we have nominees every year from the UAs, which mean that we have a different, potentially a different constituency of the committee every year that we're formed. Hence the reason why we have to have a reconfirmation of the chair on an annual basis. So that's as we stand at the moment.
Okay, I think that touches on the point, but doesn't explicitly show itself in the terms of reference, which is what the committee had asked, is that there's an explicit mention of the ability of the independent members, element of voting, possibility of chairing or not. It is not explicitly very clear. I think it's useful. I mean, I think we can check with other members who've read the document if they find it explicitly clear or not, and if they prefer it to be explicitly clear.
Note the comment, Chair.
So it's my understanding is that the terms of reference can only be changed at an EGM or an AGM of the combined authority.
Indeed. So what was reported to the committee was the comments that came back from this committee, and the committee approved the terms of reference in the terms that you have before you. So if you want to make any further changes, then we would need to go back to committee. There will be an opportunity for further amendments to the Constitution, because there are changes, legislative changes, coming through across a number of areas, and so there'll be further opportunities to amend the Constitution generally, but also because historically we've not taken annual reviews, terms and reference and the like through to committee. We'll be seeking to do that on a regular basis now, so there will be more of an opportunity to manage the terms of reference for all the committees on an annual basis, so that we stay abreast of changes in legislation or changes in the way that business is conducted.
So at which point would we reconvene on the terms of reference then? Is that after the expansion plans?
I mean, it's for the committee. If the committee want to bring back the matter for further consideration on their terms of reference, happy to come back to this committee and have a wider discussion.
So we could have that discussion when we have the constitutional review meeting in September.
You could have that discussion then. I would suggest, because that's going to be the change of the standing orders and the way that the committee works and some other legislative changes that are coming through, that's probably going to be a pretty full-on experience at that stage. I would suggest that perhaps you've just had a change in your terms of reference approved by committee now, that perhaps you program that in over the coming months at a time when you have a bit more time to give that some active consideration and then determine what you would like to see in terms of your own terms of reference, bearing in mind that really you should be following the SIP for Good guidance principles in terms of this committee as an assurance committee for audit.
Thank you, Bob. And Solange, can that be added to the work plan, please?
Sure.
Councillor Simon.
Yes, I agree we should leave this, but can I just make a brief comment on Councillor Shabala's two comments? Firstly, because the cycles of election of the different unitaries aren't aligned, that makes an additional argument for annual election. And secondly, since the independent members are members of the committee, it seems to me that they could be elected as chair or vice chair should the committee choose to do so in accordance with this provision, with what these terms of reference currently say. But I agree we should come back to this in the autumn.
Thank you, Councillor Simon.
Jennifer.
Sorry.
There's, in the final terms of reference, there's a provision in section 6 for this hearing subcommittee. So it says that the audit committee shall appoint a hearing subcommittee. Is that something that is done formally, or is that on an as needs basis?
On an as needed basis.
And so Shabalala?
Yes, just on that point, I wonder if there's been an assessment on the audit's capacity to really encompass all the new additional items and working groups, both from councillors' capacity and officers' capacity, because there's quite a number of new things for us to all consider, both in terms of additional training and just awareness of things. How is that assessment kind of been taken in place just to ensure that there's the right capacity to manage what's being suggested as this new terms and reference? Because I haven't been asked if I've got the capacity, so I don't know if you guys have kind of done that as officers to see if you can, really manage these new terms and reference.
Pete, do you think you can come in? So there's normally a self-assessment that takes place for the audit committee, but I'll ask internal audit to take that on.
Yeah, so under the requirements, there is supposed to be a self-assessment for the committee of their ability to both undertake the role and their capacity and understanding of terms of reference on bits and pieces. That will be completed because there is the elections coming up. Then the view would be that that would likely take place after the elections have taken place, because it would feel, probably, to be frank about it, a waste of your time if we were to ask to do that exercise prior to the elections taking place, and then there being a wholesale change committee following the elections. So we'll pencil that in, probably looking at summer, autumn of the next financial year would be our indication to do that. And that would also align as well with any changes to WECA's makeup in terms of North Somerset, for example, potentially joining them.
So, Chair, based on that feedback, does that mean for the duration of time until that assessment is done, we'll be actually managing in an uncertain capacity constraint until the assessment is done to really show what can be achieved and what can't be achieved with the capacity that's there? So it kind of feels a little bit like an element of risk. And I'm just conscious of how that risk is being managed, both on your part and our part, to make sure that we've got the due diligence, the effectiveness of time to really go through all the new items that may come in the best way that we can for both public and for the service in itself.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, we haven't been made aware of any issues in terms of capacity of councillors so far to undertake the role. So we would expect that to be raised through the chairman if that was to be the case. So at the moment, we haven't got any undue concerns in that respect. There is a possibility that we could move that self-effectiveness review forwards. All I would say is that it is a big piece of work, and that we wouldn't want to, ironically, take up all of our time to do that piece of work for then, as I say, for a new committee to then be established later on down the line. So from my perspective, that would feel unnecessary at this point in time. However, if there was an absolute request through the committee, through the chair, then we will be happy to look at that, and we can facilitate that. And I can speak to Solange to get that arranged. But my recommendation would be that unless anyone has got any, as well as yourself, has got any serious concerns about the capacity at the moment, then we've got no undue concerns around how the committee is operating. We can see by the terms of questions that are being asked, we can see by the level of scrutiny which is being taken place, that we haven't got any concerns. I'm sure external audit would mention as well if they had any concerns. So that's our current position.
Thank you for that, Pete. And also, I'd like to note that it is up to the unitary authorities' political groups to send people who are engaged and prepared to work with the committee. So let's make sure that the political groups are engaged with this process, please. So let's move on. Move on to item 7 for items for the public. We received 12 questions that were received by the deadline. These questions and responses have been published and circulated, and I'm assuming that councillors and members of this committee have read them. Please note that some of the questions received were not in accordance with the authority's standing orders, as they contained a number of subsets of questions. Therefore, only the first questions have been published and responded to in each of these cases. So can members of the public make sure that they conform to this particular request, please? In addition, 6 statements have been received, and these statements were published and circulated in advance of this meeting. Some members of the public have indicated they wish to address the committee on the topic of their statements. Each speaker has up to 3 minutes each, and there is 30 minutes in total set aside for this item. The clerk will indicate when each speaker has 30 seconds left. Please note that some statements were submitted on behalf of other people. These have not been included, as it is not possible to receive consent or confirmation from these individuals prior to the submission deadline that those individuals were happy that the statements were submitted in their names. So can members of the public also be aware of that, please? So let's start with a statement from Charlie Surrett, please.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak today. I'm speaking on behalf of the Reclaim Our Buses campaign. We're glad to finally have some idea of a date for the bus plan to be published in October this year in the Mayor's response to our questions at last month's joint committee. And we're also pleased to finally get some idea of the remit of the ARUP report in WECA's response to Joseph Lloyd's public internal request review after his FOI request. However, we continue to be concerned about the lack of transparency of WECA's investments, financial and temporal, in formulating bus improvement proposals. These concerns are further enhanced by the answer to our question to this audit committee earlier this week, in which we asked for specifics on the work done by WECA to compare ongoing costs of a franchising model against the everyday costs currently being borne by WECA residents under enhanced partnership. The authority replied that it is doing work to assess potential funding mechanisms and explore a range of funding options. Essentially, what work was answered with, yes, work. I'm sure the committee can understand why I'm not fully satisfied with that answer. Transparency is crucial to ensuring public trust and accountability. WECA's residents, not to mention your own staff, should know how WECA's money is being spent and the outcomes of any reports that WECA or commissioned bodies produce. We hope to see the products of WECA's expenses in great detail in the bus plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. Let's move on to Andrew Lynch then, please.
Thank you. Always glad to speak to a committee. I think you can see from my statement today that I've grave concerns about the quality and veracity about certain parts of the auditor's report. For the most part, the governance of this authority was a shambles during the time of this report. There were sackings of senior staff, the flawed hiring of the chief executive's buddies from Bristol City Council, sometimes on £20,000 a month. Where does value for money come into that? But it's not mentioned. A witch hunt over a relatively minor regrading of senior officers, a witch hunt that failed to report its £50,000 costs in the transparency data, supposedly a process problem, until I forced the authority to do so. And tied to that, a potential whistleblower report that's been covered up.
Andrew, can I remind you to keep to your statement, please, as opposed to ad-libbing?
You said you wanted me to address my statement. This is addressing it. Well, perhaps we could just have a minute's silence for the lack of transparency in this committee.
Thank you, Andrew. Let's move on to Caroline Dunn, please.
I wish to introduce my statement, which is fairly simple and obvious and I don't think needs repeating. My questions and statements are to alert you to litigation as an unintended consequence, because I believe that you cannot sign yourself out of liability if a reasonable person could reasonably be expected to pay attention to and foresee possible problems. If BCC projects aren't overseen properly to ensure they're safe and compliant, it will at some point be argued it is at least partially your responsibility. And I feel that this could occur because the various authorities' discussions, perhaps grounded in facts, but are not grounded in realities. I have suggested site visits to various schemes before, notably Dovercourt Road closure, but I have no idea if any have ever taken place. With people from other areas taking funding decisions that have far-reaching ramifications, I strongly urge you to build site visits in to at least the most controversial decisions. You cannot rely on BCC processes as they've been pushing through an anti-car agenda in complete defiance of the PSCD, but the massive impacts affect not only our disabled people as they've reduced the ability of all people, goods and vehicles to get around the city without providing genuine public transport alternatives. And most people and most journeys cannot be done by bicycle. It is having a huge negative impact on disabled people, but it's also having a really massive and huge negative impact on tradespeople. I was in the EBLN area yesterday and a plumber called Michael was explaining what huge problems they have because of the EBLN bus gate at the fish shop, how it causes huge problems going to the feeder road area to get them supplies and materials. Sorry, I've almost finished. This disruption and anti-car agenda has slowed everyone down and stopped people going to places. Our economy has stalled. Places are shutting. We now have YouTube videos saying don't visit Bristol, showing loads and loads of shops shut. And I, along with other disabled people, can't park hardly anywhere. I really beseech you, committee, to stop this blind ideological madness which is threatening.
There are 30 seconds left.
And I'm asking, could you perhaps insist, for example, that bus gates only operate part-time? Because I'm very worried about WECA. Have you got money in a pot for multiple claims? I really think you need to take this possibility seriously because it will affect all your balance sheets. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Let's move on to Dave Redgewell, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to come back on what this committee is set up for, which is audit. And I'll go back to the Bus Services Act 2025, number 2, and the powers that are given to this authority on behalf of Secretary of State for Transport to carry out that function. It's a legal function and spend public grants by the Secretary of State, which at the moment is £51 million for services, including the well-supported Children's Go Free, although this some of the government's paying for it. But there are other schemes like the care leavers and that. But there's also supported services, buying frequencies and funding bus routes. Now, there's a thing called passengers in the legal statutes that are published by the Department for Transport. And so far, I will commend Pam and I will commend particularly Phil Wright and his team for sorting out the country buses with the mayor. We got a lot of them restored and retained. We did not retain the bus services in Bristol, so there will be further reductions in Bristol services again from the end of July. And the problem is that we have a problem in Bristol with its CAS money, its paying of the levy, and then the level of bus services provided. We've got a huge chunk of Bristol, which has now become a desert area, and that's around Stapleton, up towards Frenchay, and all those communities around there, and the orbital buses across from Parkway to Bath, which go in and out of the Baines, Bristol, South Gloss boundary. But the most important thing is there are statutory instruments which this authority would have to respond to by the 30th of September. And that is your plan for accessibility for buses, for disabled people, stops and shelters and information and buses themselves. You will have to respond to the government about your consultation. You had an online forum, online consultation. You had no public documents in any libraries because we had everyone checked in the 4 UAs. There was nothing. North Somerset's held a bus forum. WECA's not. It's held no forum. I welcome that. There's been no official forums. I sit on the forum for Wiltshire, Gloucestershire, Somerset and Dorset. Now I'm setting one up in Cornwall with the aid of the DFT. So why are we still not auditing this properly and why are we not going through the procedures? I hope this committee will look at the items returned to Secretary of State on 30th September. And of course,
There are 30 seconds left.
To see how we get to enhance partnerships and what's going on there with consultants and rearranging everything, and where we are with Andy Burnham's new agenda when he becomes Prime Minister of actually going for franchising and public control. So I'm not seeing this, and I'm seeing this in Somerset, Wiltshire, Gloucestershire, and Dorset and Cornwall. So I ask that these documents are public, transparent with the public. That is a public service out there. It's got West on the side of every bus. Your train businesses are much more transparent. Please, we look at buses and properly order them, including why Westlink has a call centre in Spain. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. I heard a lot of questions in that statement. If you could make sure you ask them at the next either combined meeting or this meeting, that would be good. So thank you very much. Oh, no, we've got one more statement to be made by Joe Sargent, please.
Hi, committee. First time I've been here. It's fun. Public transport continues to be the largest responsibility of the West of England Combined Mayoral Authority. There are well over 1 million people reliant on WECA to ensure that breadwinners can get to work, young people can get to school, college or training, and everyone can access the health, well-being and social support they need. This isn't going to happen without congestion increasing and our climate going in the wrong direction temperature-wise unless we actually sort out our buses. All we're seeing are millions of pounds being earmarked for vague projects. There's a lot of money being talked about, but there's no real sense of what it's for, and certainly not enough to actually realise a mass transit system. And there is a real concern that most of this cash is actually going to be spent on external consultants because that's where it all seems to go. And what I worry about is these consultants are actually they're upskilling themselves at our expense, and they take that skill set away and make more money out of another local authority. And we continue to lack the in-house expertise we need in areas such as bus franchising, and that's sort of partly why I think we're just not progressing at all. And the results of this approach are projects that seem to take forever to achieve, and I look forward to that, or they just don't happen at all, which seems to be what happens most of the time. And I just get this feeling that we're going to be back here in another year, and we're going to be asking the same questions, and we're going to be seeing the same level of progress, and nothing will have changed for anyone realistically in the region. And I think that's very depressing, and I'd like the committee to give that serious thought about how we really are spending the taxpayers' money, for want of a better term, and also, are we really giving value for money by just doing nothing? Even if we're not asking for more money, we're still doing nothing with the money we've got. So please bear that in mind, and please let us not be here again in another 12 months' time talking about the same things. Thank you.
Thank you, the members of the public, for submitting your statements. They have been duly noted by the councillors and officers. Right, let's move on to chair's announcements and the report back from the main committee. So I would like to welcome Councillor Drew and Councillor Blake to this committee. Thank you for coming and attending. I'd like to also note that there is a recruitment process for independent members in working, and hopefully we can have another independent member in place by the next round of the autumn meeting. I'd like to say that this committee can be a word salad of acronyms to help the meeting flow. If people use an acronym, could they please explain what it stands for? So I'll make a start with these. WECA, the West of England Combined Authority. MCA stands for Mayoral Combined Authority. UA stands for Unitary Authority, the councils that make up the MCA. Bristol, Baines, Bath and North East Somerset, South Gloucestershire, and partly North Somerset, you might well hear today. The MHCLG, which is the Ministry of Housing, Communities and also Local Government. CRSTS, which stands for City Regional Sustainable Transport Settlement. TCR, which is the Transport for City Regions, which is the successor to CRSTS. CIPFA, which is the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. And NAO stands for National Audit Office. And just a reminder, if you do use an acronym, can you explain what it is? So that concludes my announcements. Let's go on to item 9, which is the draft statements of accounts. Steve Finnegan will give us a verbal update on the publication of the draft statements accounts. A link to the draft and unaudited statements of accounts published on 30th of June was sent to the Audit Committee. Steve Finnegan will walk us through it at the informal briefing. So go ahead, Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's just a brief update, as you say. The draft accounts were published on our website last week, the 30th of June, together with a notice of public rights. And that's for any person that can inspect any related documents to the accounts until the 11th of August. We're also holding the informal briefing next week on the 16th, so I would certainly recommend all members to attend if you can do. It's online. And Grant Thornton have also began their audit of the draft accounts last week, and they will be with us throughout July and into August.
Thank you very much, Steve. Councillor Simon.
Perhaps the committee would like to congratulate the finance team on meeting a very tight deadline and meeting it.
Indeed, I think lemonades all round. Yes. So let's move on to item 10, which is the Treasury Management Outturn report. This report provides a review of performance to 31st of March 2026. This report is noting, and Steve Finnegan is going to be leading that one as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just the key points from the report then. The overall investment balances as at the year end were £452 million, which has fallen by 33 million since the previous quarter. Again, we continue to use the list of approved investment options and counterparties within our Treasury management strategy. And we also operate within the framework of the SITFA and Prudential Codes of Practice. Total investment income for the year was almost £23 million, which was £7 million above the budgeted figure. We were receiving an average interest rate of 4.6%. The pool fund's capital value has fallen since the previous quarter, with a capital loss at year end at £4 million. And we retain the £5 million earmarked reserve to cover any future potential losses. All the Treasury management potential indicators within target. And I would welcome any member questions.
Councillor Hucker.
Yeah, and thank you, Steve, for the report. Yeah, it's obviously, I've got a comment and a question. Yeah, obviously disappointing to see that the pooled funds, the value has fallen since the last quarter. I realise that a provision has been made for the capital loss, but it's disappointing that the value doesn't appear to be recovering. In fact, it's going in the opposite direction. Anyway, my question relates to the value of investments and the cash flows in the year. So the value of investments at the end of the year, 452.6 million. That's slightly lower than the end of the previous year, 462.3 million. Looking at the cash flow statement, it appears that the authority received 205 million in capital grants. So would I be correct in thinking that those capital grants came from central governments?
You would be correct, yes.
Yeah. It seems odd to me that that bearing in mind that the authority has got a huge amount of money, basically surplus cash, on deposit, it's still receiving very large amounts of funding from central government. And when you have such large amounts of cash on deposit, if you look at it, if you take the public sector as a whole, that obviously has a significant carry cost. So I'm sort of struggling to understand why central government are still putting so much funding into WECA when it has a very substantial cash surplus already. Perhaps you could explain that to me in simple terms, because it just doesn't seem logical to me.
I think I want to answer that, but at the same time, although we've received £205 million capital receipts in year, I believe the capital expenditure in the accounts were above 200 million as well. I'll leave the next part for James to answer, but also in terms of the pooled funds, I mean, there is some good news. As at the end of June, they've increased by another £1 million, so we're currently on the loss of 3 million.
So I suppose in answer to your question, is largely central government policy, which we don't have any power to dictate, but majority of the money is coming from schemes like CRSTS, where the payment schedule was agreed in advance and it was just split evenly over 5 years. There has been some recognition from the DFT because we aren't the only combined authority in that position. Everybody's exactly the same. They have large amounts of cash in hand because they aren't spending as quickly at the start of major capital schemes, which is normal. So I think TCR, there is some consideration going in from DFT certainly to sort of back ending the profile a little bit more to reflect actual spend. But as there's an agreed 5-year payment terms, that they're sticking with that. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yes, it does. I assumed that it wasn't necessarily something that the authority had any control over. But it just appears to be a very inefficient way of managing public finance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hugger. And Councillor Coombs, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to have a look at the table on page 48, so table 1, investments by type. I was struggling to follow it. First I thought, well, I'm not an accountant, but then this is an audit committee, so I'm supposed to understand what you're telling us. So the net movement there, that applies to some of the lines, but not all of them. And yet all of them are apparently accruing interest. So shouldn't every line be increasing in value because a 4% interest rate has accrued to it over the course of the year?
Well, all the pooled funds are income-based funds, so we have a choice really. We can add them to the capital value, and so therefore the funds would increase. But we have opted to have them paid monthly, so they immediately hit our I&E as investment interest. In terms of the local authority and other government bodies we've invested in, again, we receive maturity interest on the value date when it's returned to us. All those interests fall within the CIES, so they're part of our income and expenditure accounts rather than a balance sheet item.
So is there an entry in this report for the money which has been taken out, or the revenue from those investments?
Not broken down in a table like that. I mean, we can present it in future committee meetings. We just show it in the report as one single value of £22.7 million.
Okay, and the net movement section then, why has money been taken in or out of those accounts? Where does that appear in the report?
It doesn't appear elsewhere in the report. It's just the fluctuations in year between, an example would be the local authorities and the money market funds, where the money market funds were drawn down on a day-to-day basis to cover our daily expenditure when we have payment runs and things like that. The only other place you'd really see it in is any movements in year in the financial statements.
Right, so you introduced the first thing by saying that over the course of the year we've got £10 million less on investment.
Yeah.
And that's because money has been taken out for spending, day-to-day spending, the capital to which it was found to us.
That's exactly what it is, day-to-day spending. We have a detailed cash flow forecast for the following 12 months. It's less detailed for 18 months. And we are making high accounts payable runs on a weekly basis. The contra to that is we're regularly having sales invoices paid and receiving grant funding.
That feels like something that could be explained in the report as well. So money is coming out of the investments. So there's the investment income is coming out and the capital is being withdrawn. And that, I think, is an important part of Treasury management, to note what that is and where it's going. The next one then, so comparing table 2 with almost immediately after it, table 3, so the pooled funds, they were worth 50 million when first invested, but are now worth less than that. But the portfolio still records them as 50 million. So shouldn't that table 1 account for the loss over the course of the year, because that's the capital?
Yeah, we can show it like that. The difference between the two are held on our balance sheet as an unusable reserve, because we're not actually showing yet the loss for those capital funds.
So is it fair to say that we're gaining 5% rate of return on a fund which is losing money each year?
Yes, we are. Yeah, the capital value, if we were to sell those shares in that fund, we would be looking at a capital loss to our I&E. But the actual rate of return on some of those funds are above 5%, yes.
It's a little bit misleading to say that we're making a profit on it when our capital is being eroded, isn't it?
The capital does erode. It is in shares, so it can fluctuate daily. over the lifetime of these funds, it's in the region of 12 to 13 million pounds we've received from these pooled funds. And the main reason we invested in them was during COVID, when the interest rate, the base rate, was 0.1%. And we were looking at protecting our investment income, which covers a lot of the back office costs.
Okay, so the final on page 55, it's Appendix 5, where we're saying that we have made 22.9 million on interest payments. Is that including the loss on the funds, or is that netted off somewhere else? And how do we account for also taking money out of the system? So that's 22.9. Is that money which has been taken out of the system because it was a revenue interest? And then there's another 10 million taken out of the system because we were drawing down on it anyway. And there's also about 4 million of loss to consider against that.
No, the 22.9 million is the investment interest we've received on all our capital values. So the total of approaching 500 million pounds, which sits on our balance sheet, short-term investments, long-term investments, cash and cash equivalents. The value of those items on the balance sheet fluctuate on a week-to-week basis, or in fact a daily basis, depending on how high the value of our payments are and how much income we're receiving.
But that's not reflected on the annual statement, where they're recorded as the same value as they were last year.
That's not reflected on the pooled funds part of that annual statement, no.
I have scrutinised and I'm not happy with how this is presented, Chair.
And thank you very much for that forensic detail that you brought to it. Councillor Leach.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring attention to a significant typo at the bottom of page 45, where in reference to Appendix 5, it says the budget for 25-26 investment income was 15,094 million. I assume that's meant to be 15 million, not 15 billion.
It's 15 million, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Leach, for spotting that one. And Councillor Blake.
Thank you, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, what this Treasury report tells me is where we've got money on that we're not investing, we're not actually spending, we need to invest it prudently, and it's telling me that. For me, though, I think it tells me that what WECA needs to do is get on and spend its money, spend its money on projects for the benefit of our region. And that's, for me, what it tells me more than anything else, that actually delivery is what we need to focus on in this authority over and above everything else. And I worry about back loading projects, if I'm being honest with you, because in my experience in BT, when I was a programme director in BT, you backload a programme and you often don't spend it at the end of the programme. So I would urge the authority to look at speeding up its delivery, getting this money out of investments and spending it for the benefit of the public in our region. Other than that, I think it's a prudent report that tells me that the money that we do have, taxpayers' money, we're investing it in the right way.
Can I just clarify my backloading comment? It's not that we're backloading it necessarily and going, well, we're going to do all the activity at the end, because to your point, that is not a great way to run a program. It's just that the early stages of a significant capital infrastructure program cost 1-2 million. When you start pouring concrete and getting people actually working, that's when the actual cost of doing stuff dramatically increases. So it's not that we're pushing time, it's just the cost profile.
And if I can just back up something I believe that you said, James, that the profile of the CRSTS spend was expected to be equal across those years. I think that's one lesson that we have learned from CRSTS, is that the profile is not equal across all the years and needs to be allocated in preference to the actual when we can actually deliver the projects.
So again, just to clarify, we didn't assume that the profile was going to be equal. Central government made that assumption and made the payments on that basis. We knew that it was never going to.
Then government needs to be corrected of that.
Sorry, I don't want to drag the item out too long, but just to plug that we do have our Treasury advisors who we take our advice from, doing an informal session on our Treasury in it's either October or November time. So I would encourage all members to turn up. So we will walk through in detail our current Treasury arrangements and alignment with the code.
And Shabalala, Councillor Shabalala, you want to come in?
Yes, just picking up on Councillor Coombs' point. Just one point of clarification. Did you say that from some of the investment funds are drawn monthly? What was that? So part of the portfolio is drawn monthly to cover expenditure and capital costs. Is that right?
Yes, it's a general comment really around our cash flow. We're drawn down from our cash balances, which is separate accounting to actual drawn down from the grant funding and things like that. I'm just talking about the cash flow of our treasury management.
Okay. So, and as Councillor Coombs highlighted, in terms of actually understanding where some of that expenditure is, that's not fully detailed. So my assumption would be if staff cost is one of those, or if you did not extract every month, what would be the potential turnover from that interest if you found other ways of covering the needs of extracting monthly? Have you done a little forecast to determine?
We update the forecast on a regular basis, and we have regular treasury meetings. In terms of taking staffing as an example, and the cost of that, it's not all of the staffing of our 400 and so staff here comes from treasury investment management. The interest we make, a number of staff can be attributed to the capital receipts as well, because they are working on specific capital projects. So it becomes funded by the capital income we receive on that too.
Thanks. My question is, has the exploration of if you didn't extract monthly and that was an annual or every 2 years, what would be the actual difference in terms of return, and where else would you find the money that you're extracting monthly if you weren't using this method?
So it'd be really difficult to try and do it on an annual basis like that, because our cash flows vary wildly. Like, yes, we've got an element of staff pay, for example, that's fairly fixed. We know exactly what that looks like. But the majority of the money that we're paying out isn't for that sort of activity. It's for capital expenditure on CRSDS. That's probably the big ticket item. So you might find 1 month you're paying, these are just example figures, £1 million, and then another month you're paying £100 million out to third parties in grant payments. So trying to do it over the year like that, it'd be really difficult to sort of model what the impact would be, because of stages that you were at in various capital programs, it would change wildly from 1 year to the next what the actual payments out to third parties would be. So I mean, the most efficient way to do it is to have small amounts that are sort of in quite much more easily accessible pots of money, which is the way that we work it, and then you can draw down as needed from that. If you don't have enough to meet your cash flow requirements, the alternative is you then have to borrow.
Okay.
So then you're introducing an interest expense that you don't need to have. I mean, timing wise, it might turn out that you're paying less on the interest for your borrowing than you are for what you're lending out, but that's a gamble. It's a little bit more difficult to do. So that's the reason that we look at it on a regular basis. So there's a lot of active cash flow management that we have to do to make sure that we're optimizing our investments.
Okay. And my final one. So in those peaks and troughs of what the return is and the expenditure being quite an uncertain element, has there been a pattern that's been recognized so that we can better manage particular risks based on, I don't know, maybe as you're saying, transport schemes, or has there been an actual pattern that you foresee as the core issues that needs to be addressed? And if so, what are those concerns that we need to be aware of?
I think during the course of the year, for 10 months of the year, the patterns are very similar, so it's quite stable in terms of what's coming in and going out. The peak really, and how we could potentially fall foul to or maybe need a short-term temporary borrowing is at year end, because we do receive an awful lot of, looking at our capital spend for last year, a quarter of it came in March. So there were a number of late claims from the 3 unitary authorities, plus our other partners were backloading and catching up with their grant claims. So if there's one issue, it would happen at year end.
Thank you everyone for your questioning. So I have on my script that this is a report for actually noting, but given the level of questioning I think this particular item has had, I wondered if we need something slightly more robust than just noting.
Yeah,
You can't change it.
In the minutes, we'll capture the questions that are asked. If you want something more detailed to come forward, then perhaps we pick that up in the forward plan part of the business.
Okay. I think it does require something more detailed, I think, in the future. So can that also be added to the forward plan, please, Solange?
Well, you and I probably need to discuss what that looks like offline.
Okay, that's fine. So the recommendation is that the West of England Mayoral Combined Authority Committee is required to note the Treasury Management Outturn report to the 31st of March 2026, prepared in accordance with the SIPFA Treasury Code of Practice and the Treasury Management Indicators to 31st of March 2026. So we are noting that, I think. Thank you very much. So let's move on to item 11, the Internal Audit Annual Report. This is the closing internal audit report to the Audit Committee for the financial year 25-26. Included is a summary of audit performance and key issues, as well as the formal opinion of the internal control framework. Pete Can will be presenting this report, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So the recommendation for this report is that the Audit Committee are asked to note the internal audit reports and the opinion on the internal control environment for the period 1st of April 25 to 31st of March 26. So the headline information is on page 58 of the report pack. And in section 4, this gives you the summary headline information for 25-26, and I will provide some further commentary around this. So the key message for the committee is that from the audits completed within the 25-26 planned programme of work, there have not been any reports issued where it's considered that the system of internal control gave either no assurance, which is what we determine as a level 1, or limited assurance, which we determine as a level 2. So there have been none of those. This is positive news for the committee, and you'll note that the service areas we've audited across the combined authority during the past year have either been assessed as having reasonable or substantial levels of assurance. If you'd like to see a detailed breakdown of those internal audit reviews, they are on page 59 of the report pack. The committee will also be pleased to see that in addition to the formal internal reviews that were conducted, we also provided independent assurance over a significant amount of grant expenditure. Members of the committee will be aware that the central government grant funding, which is provided to the combined authority, must be subject to a detailed review by an independent accountant or auditor. And as the internal audit service, we provide that work, we undertake that work, and we review and sign off millions of pounds worth of income for the combined authority. So during 25-26, the internal audit service certified a total of £31.8 million worth of grants, and all of the claims that we reviewed were found to have complied with the necessary grant expenditure terms and conditions. So if you move on to item 8 of the report now, please. And in addition to our planned audits, we also received 2 requests for unplanned work during the year. So the largest of these requests was for review of the Organisational Improvement Programme, or the OIP, as you'll hear it called. And the committee will be, or they will recall that we reported this in detail back in the December 2025 meeting. So we have since followed up on recommendations made within that OIP review, and we can confirm that all of the required actions have been fully implemented. And in addition to this, we have also continued to attend meetings of the OIP board, where we attend them in an observer status, and we offer ongoing assurance work and consultancy on the programme as is required. The rest of our follow-up work on audit recommendations are then reported in section 14 of the report, and committee members were advised that all of the agreed recommendations have been followed up with the officers responsible. Nearly all of them were implemented as agreed in year, with 65 of 68 recommendations having been implemented in full. However, there was one audit relating to the Mobility as a Service (MAAS) project management, where 3 of the 7 recommendations made were found to have only been partially implemented and they remain in progress. A revised implementation date was agreed, and that was to be agreed that they'd be implemented in August 2026, and we will provide an update to the Audit Committee in due course. Section 21 of the report details our fraud prevention coverage and notes the combined authorities' overarching counter-fraud arrangements, including their counter-fraud, bribery and corruption strategy, which is in line with the CIPFA's best practice guidance. And you'll see that whilst we undertake specific and targeted counter-fraud audits, we also consider the risks and controls around fraud throughout all of our internal audit reviews and our planning that we undertake. So we also used things like data analytics and AI during the year to assist this, including in areas of review such as travel subsistence claims and payroll variations. In addition to this, we've also promoted fraud prevention, related information and awareness to staff throughout the year, and it is our intention to hold a counter-fraud briefing session for members of the committee in the coming months. So finally, moving on to section 40 of the report, and as part of our statutory requirements, I am required to give an opinion on the combined authorities' internal control framework. So as highlighted within during our previous reports to the Audit Committee throughout the previous year, I am reporting the state of internal control framework as satisfactory. That is based on our audit opinions and delivery of the 25-26 annual internal audit programme. We found that the West of England Combined Authorities' internal control framework had not altered significantly from the previous year, and it is therefore my opinion that based on the work which we completed, the internal control framework and systems to manage risk continue to be reasonable. I would like to acknowledge the Audit Committee's support of our work and overall maintaining effective corporate governance, which is appreciated, and I would like to thank all of the Audit Committee members for their input and guidance throughout the year. So really that concludes our report, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Pete. Just a very quick and simple question. On the core audit work, the results look satisfactory. Could you ever potentially issue a level 5 opinion full assurance, or is level 4 reasonable assurance that the highest opinion that you offer?
So yeah, so for the benefit of the committee, thank you for the question. For the benefit of the committee, our levels go from level 1, which is the considered poor, through to level 5, which, as you say, is considered effective. The highest opinion which we delivered last year was substantial, which is a level 4. We have delivered level 5 audit reports in the past. They are very few and far between, I would say, as are also level 1s, which are the lowest, the poorest. So generally, you would find as a committee that your levels would be either 2 or 3 or 4. And for the combined authority last year, they were between a 3 and a 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? I have a clarification question. The 3 reports that received a limited opinion, they'll be coming to the September meeting in full detail, will they, please?
We haven't issued any reports with a limited opinion so far this year. We've got level 3s at reasonable and level 4s substantial, but nothing yet is a limited. Not on the table which I'm looking at. No, there's some. We've got level 3s and level 4s in there, but we haven't got anything of a level 2. Seconds. Oh, I beg your pardon. That was from the previous. That was from the previous year. That's a follow-up of recommendations from the previous year. That was 24, 25. Yes. And what we did with those is we went through and we confirmed that the recommendations that were made in those reports had been implemented, and they will have, with the exception of the mass one, which is the one which I highlighted within the reports, which we're then going to update you on later on. Yeah.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you. This report is for noting. The Audit Committee is asked to note the internal audit annual report for 25-26 and the opinion on the internal audit control environment. So I consider that noted. So let's.
After we've voted for the noted, I just wonder what's the sort of governance route for this then? So who actually approved it before it came here for noting? Well, I get frustrated with noting, if I'm being honest with you, because we're a big group of people here. Do we take an active role in decision making, or do we sit back and take a sort of a more passive role? Now, noting, obviously, we can raise issues, and that's for the public to hear and all the rest of it. I get that. There's a theatre about this process, but this is a substantial report. These are year-end type reports that need to be approved at some point. So I just wondered who's approving them for us to then note them.
So they're being noted because the decision as to whether to issue the certificate or whatever it's called is for the internal auditors to do, which they've done. So you're noting the fact that they've reached this conclusion. So they're the body that reached that conclusion. It's being reported to you, so you have visibility of that and can ask suitable questions.
Yeah, just to add on to that, thank you, Bob. There are several reports during the year which you are required to approve. So a good example of that would be before we complete our plan work for the year, you, as a committee, you are asked to sign off that work, and it gives you the comfort that you will need as a committee in terms of the scope and coverage that we'll be completing for the year. That's one example. There's several other reports which you will be asked to approve. This is a noting report because this work has been completed, and as Bob said, it's work that we've given an opinion on as an independent internal audit assurance function. So you can rely on our work as an independent internal audit function that everything is in order.
That's definitely helpful. I think whenever we get to a point where we're having a report to note, we need to really think about what the purpose of our involvement is in that.
As Peter's explained, there are other steps in this process where you will have sign off as well. So it's a multi-stage issue, as you say.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Shabalala.
Yes, I hear the fellow colleagues' concern, and thanks for the clarification, because as part of the terms and reference, we are mainly looking at things that have come down other lines. I think what would be useful in this document is having some of those appendix to actually then show the decision pathway that's been taken. So when actually going through the document, you understand the different decision pathways that it's taken, and therefore can reference that for where the decision has come from, and understand when we are noting, we've got that substantial background. I think just going through this, that additional background, and obviously he's a new colleague here, so that additional background would kind of help with that reassurance. Is that something that we could implement on some of the documentation, especially hyperlinks?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I mean, we do provide that. So as an example, when we do the audit plan, as an example, that does take through the different stages that it goes through. I do hear your point though, and what we'll do is we'll include that going forward as well, so that it's repeated again within this report, and it will then give you the comfort that you need to ensure that you can then find links or the information which shows that pathway. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think we consider this report noted. So let's move on to item 12, which is the expansion of the combined authority to provide audit committee with an overview of the work underway to expand the West of England combined authority to include North Somerset Council. Rachel Pikett's going to give us this update.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a regular update to Audit Committee on the expansion proposal. We last updated in December and committed that we'd come back when we had reached this stage of the process. So just to update briefly, since December, WECA Committee has approved the proposal to consult the public on the question of expansion, approved the expansion proposal itself in draft in January and the full final draft in June. And committee has supported the Mayor's intention to submit the expansion proposal to government, which took place on the 12th of June. North Somerset Council also approved the proposal to expand at their meeting in May. So the proposal is now with government to consider, and the next stage of the process are government-led. So the timing is in their hands. Our expectation is that we should move through the next stage of the process should government approve the proposal over the course of the autumn, with expansion being concluded potentially by the back end of this calendar year or early next calendar year. Just in terms of the process that we have gone through, to note one change from the process that we set out in December, when the Devolution Act was passed earlier in the year, the final consent point for expansion of combined authorities shifted slightly. So we were anticipating that final consent was going to come in the autumn. That got brought forward in the change in the government process. So committee and North Somerset provided their final local consent in May and June. So depending on the government process, we expect expansion to conclude within this financial year. And I will leave it there and happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Drew.
Yeah, you may have discussed this previously, but is it robust against any challenge by the member of the public that with the expansion of, by including North Somerset, the very marginal position of the mayor, who's got 25% of a 30% turnout, but expanded electorate may produce a different outcome? Is there any way that any member of the public could legally challenge such expansion without a re-election of the mayor?
I'm going to defer to Bob on that one, but I think the answer is no.
So I think the two separate issues there. One is, can somebody bring an action? Yes, they can, but we don't believe they're likely to be successful in the circumstances. It's a government decision. They've considered the position themselves. They're satisfied that the process is legally robust.
I really was challenging what will be the impact if a challenge. It will not be a challenge against us, I'm pretty sure. It will be a challenge against the Secretary of State who approved it, whether he's done it lawfully, taking all things into account. It's just what impact that would have if there was a challenge.
I mean, we would look to defend that with the government, but potentially if there was a successful challenge, then that would bring a halt to the proceedings. But we're not anticipating that to be the outcome.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Shabalala?
Yes. And again, going back to my fellow councillor over there, that the document doesn't necessarily show the detailed pathway that this has kind of arrived here for noting. Yes, we had the earlier discussion about bringing this agenda item onto here, so thank you very much. But however, it doesn't kind of provide additional context. I think that's quite necessary here. And one of the things that I think I'd be looking forward to kind of see is what the different public engagements has actually said from the different local authorities to really understand the needs or the requests or the issues that's been kind of highlighted by those that have participated here. Is there a way that you can break down some of those issues and concerns so that we can better understand what the public perspective is?
Yeah, so the full report associated with the consultation is available on our website and was attached to the committee paper that was taken to WECA committee in June. So some highlights from the report are from the consultation are in that committee report. The full consultation document is on the website, so that material is all there if colleagues would like to look at it.
Thanks. I'll refer all the way back there.
Yeah, I think the issue there is that's for committee to get under those issues. I think for this committee, you asked for an update in terms of process, and as an assurance committee, then obviously process is the matter that you're concerned with, rather than the detail of what level of consideration was taken, because that's a matter for the committee, who's the ultimate decision maker in this particular matter.
Understandable, but an appendix would be great, and we can kind of absorb our own time in understanding further elements of it. So the point raised in terms of the capacity of this opportunity. How is the kind of capacity of the different local authorities and all the different funding arrangements and internal different issues and structures that they may choose to operate being risk assessed to really explore the benefits of the expansion? Has that been something that would be highlighted at some point, and if so, at which point?
So could you just clarify the question slightly?
So we've got Avon and Somerset in terms of and PCC and all these different elements that sit around the potential of the expansion. I'm just wondering about the capacity of WECA's ability, should that actually happen. What is their approach to managing the different needs, priorities, funding arrangements of different local authorities when they're all kind of under one umbrella?
So the only change being considered at this stage is the inclusion of North Somerset Council. That's the only element of the proposal.
Okay.
Councillor Simon, and I'd like to draw this to a close.
But the Avon Fire Authority then comes into question, I think. So an update later about Avon Fire would be helpful.
So the position of the Fire Authority is legislated through the Devolution Act. Places where boundaries are coterminous can take on fire responsibilities. So should the expansion proceed, then the Fire Authority is an area that we could explore. So absolutely, if that is an area of work that we get into, that can come through this committee.
Just for clarity, Chair, so under previous legislation, that was automatic. The change in legislation means that that's not automatic now. So there is a process for the government to go through in order to expand those particular issues.
Thank you. And will this subject matter actually be coming to the September constitutional review meeting, where these things will come to the boil, or not?
So you'll be getting a full report in terms of the change to standing orders and the relevant changes to some of the legislation that's coming to force already. There is some other legislation that will be coming through. So the constitutional change will be an iterative process for you as changes are brought through with supporting statutory instruments over the next few months. So you get part of the constitutional change, the current legislation, and then you'll get another go at it on a couple of occasions, as I say, as the statutory instruments come through, which will put the detail to the changes that are required.
That's useful. Do you know if there's a dashboard that is publicly available for that timetable of secondary legislation that's coming? I'm not suggesting that you supply it. I'm wondering if MHCLG should supply.
No, I mean, it'd be nice if they did, but unfortunately, no. So, but we, if you'd like that sort of information, we can sort of work out with MHCLG when they intend to bring these through. Must say, there's usually a lack of accuracy with these things, so they don't give a specific date. You'll have things like hope to bring these statutory instruments through in autumn, which usually means sort of the 25th of December, or the like.
I do think that would be really useful for both members and officers, so that we're using the same menu of options, shall we say. Thank you. So consider that noted. Thank you. Notes that information. So let's move on to item 13, which is the project management plan for delivery of the 2025-26 audit. To receive and note the project management plan for delivery for the 25-26 audit set out in the Accounts and Audit Committee Audit Regulations 2024. And Pete Barber will be presenting this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. So this is the first of 3 items from us on today's agenda. As the Chair said, this is our project management plan for 25-26. This is a new document that we're introducing across all our clients in local government, and really reflects the increased importance that we and the regulators are putting on the timely completion of the audit process. A number of you will be aware that there have been significant challenges within the sector. There's a lot of councils and other bodies out there that have not had their accounts signed off for many years. Just to be very clear, that's not the case at the Combined Authority, and we have signed off in a timely manner in prior years. But this essentially puts a bit more flesh on the bones in terms of the respective roles and responsibilities of us as auditors and you, your finance team, in firstly producing those accounts and then getting them signed off in a timely manner. Within this document, you'll see various references to the deadlines. So just to be clear, the deadline for 25-26 is the end of January 2027. You'll be aware that we prioritise those audits that we think have got the best chance of being completed in a timely manner. We have phase 1 audits that start as soon as we get the accounts. So we have phase 2 audits that start once we get the phase 1 audits out the way. You are a phase 1 audit because we have confidence in your ability not to just produce those accounts, but support them with timely working papers and prompt responses to queries. So we are optimistic that the audit can be done in a very timely manner again this year. As alluded to by Steve, the team are already underway and the work's commenced. And our aspiration is that we're out and concluded by the end of August. And it would be really great if I'm sitting here in a few months' time giving you a clean opinion on those accounts. The end of September would be the aspiration, but ultimately as a firm we are working to the end of November because that is ultimately where the deadline will be brought forward to over the next couple of years. Within this letter that was sent to the Section 73 officer, there is also an appendix which has some key performance indicators, the first of which was the delivery of the draft accounts by the end of June, which we've now ticked off, but it then goes on to talk about responsiveness to queries and sets out in a bit more detail what we need to do on each side to make sure that it works efficiently and we get over the line. There is actually also an Appendix B, which is a large Excel document, which is a live document that goes into lots of detail about the intricacies of the audit testing. And I thought I would not include that on today's agenda, given the amount of detail on the agenda. So it's really for information. It's a new document. And as I said, this is something we're doing everywhere. And I'm optimistic, but I'm happy to take any questions on the detail, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coombs, then Councillor Simon.
Thank you. I note that the previous year's audit has taken quite a lot longer to get to us. So question to the WECA finance team, if they are comfortable with the deadlines which have been given to us in this document, as it is 2 months earlier than the legal requirement.
Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to bring up the audit of pension liability on page 88. Noting that I'm
the other agenda item, next agenda item.
So
next agenda item, Councillor Simon.
Isn't it a significant risk?
No,
Sorry.
the next one.
It's the next.
All right, my apologies. I jumped ahead.
They all merge into one, but yes,
right.
It is the next one. Councillor Hucker.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick comment. I welcome the information in Appendix A. We didn't have visibility of that before, and I think it's useful to have this information. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a question about Appendix B and whether that will ever be made public or not, please.
It will, as I said, it's been shared with and discussed with finance officers. It's the live document. I suppose if anybody was remotely interested in the detail, I suppose there is an option to go to your finance officers and request access to it.
Thank you. Right, so item 13 is the project management plan for delivery. We're suggested to note that. Yeah, so let's move on to item 14. Oh, sorry, normal bit of text for that one. The Audit Committee note the authority's requirements are set out in the external audit's letter dated on the 21st of May 26, and note that a meeting has been provisionally timetabled for the 2nd of November 2026. So put that in your diaries, please. Item 14, which is the audit plan for the West of England Combined Authority year ending 31st of March 2026. And that's another one for Pete to start off, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I will introduce this at a high level. Then, with your permission, I'll hand over to Sophie, who will take you through a bit more of the detail. Just to remind members, external audit is twofold, the opinion on the accounts and the value for money conclusion. This is not a fundamentally different plan from prior years in terms of our audit approach. It's very similar. You are not a fundamentally different organisation. If I take each of the two areas in turn, if I take the opinion, clearly in terms of our approach, we adopt a substantive approach, which means that we wait for the accounts to arrive and then we audit the numbers. You'll be aware that the accounts are long, and my reflection is that every year accounts seem to get longer and longer. I think your accounts this year run to some 138 pages. And during our audit, we will audit everything within those 138 pages. But as you would expect, we prioritise and we focus on the risks and the greatest risk of misstatement. When I do come to sign those accounts, I don't sign to the penny, I sign to a materiality figure. When we put this plan together, we base that materiality on your gross spend for the prior year, because obviously at that stage we didn't have access to the draft accounts. The draft accounts have now come in, and we note the significant increase in gross expenditure in between the years. So we did actually have a meeting this morning as an engagement team and reset materiality based on the new spend. So whilst there's a figure I think of just about 6.5 million in the plan, that has now gone up to 8.6 million. So that is an important number for us, because what it means is if there are any disclosures in the primary statements above that threshold, we will undertake additional audit procedures. And then there are some particular areas of interest, one that's been alluded to by Councillor Simon, that Sophie will take you through in a minute, that require further focus. But ultimately, the aspiration is that we can sign off to that position. Just very briefly, the second area of responsibility is value for money. And once again, that is underway, and we're working on that value for money work to the same timelines that we're working to on the opinion. A lot of that work is based on cumulative knowledge. We have a separate BFM team that myself and Sophie liaise with very closely. It has regard to the key findings from the prior year, and that is an area of focus. It covers all those areas. A lot of that information is gleaned from document reviews, but we supplement it with meetings with key individuals within the organisation, including the mayor. So we've had a number of those meetings already, and that enables us to triangulate our findings and reach those balanced conclusions. So, Chair, that's the main things I wanted to cover in terms of the plan, but I will briefly hand over to Sophie, who will talk you through the significant risks.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I would like to touch on the significant risks in more detail, as we do feel it's very important for those charged with governance to understand the areas of the audit where we place quite a bit of focus. So we've identified two significant risks for the combined authority, and then one other risk, which I will cover in detail. So the first risk is a risk which is present, or we consider to be present, in every authority, and that is the risk of management override of controls. This is a non-rebuttable presumed risk which we must include. We've therefore identified this as a risk for the authority, and in particular manual journal entries. These include as well management estimates and any transactions outside of the course of business, which we might identify in the course of our testing. So as a result, we test journal entries, we will review the accounting estimates, judgments and decisions made by management, and we'll also review any unusual significant transactions as well. The second significant risk, and I've just included a number of rebuttals there, but the second significant risk is around the pension liability of the authority. So while the actual net pension liability is quite small in the accounts, being around £80,000 this year, the underlying numbers, in effect, the assets and the liabilities that net together to make that figure are very large indeed, being over £30 million a piece. This is an area where an actuary needs to be involved. There's quite a bit of judgment and estimate going into this and a number of complex assumptions underlying it. And so this is an area of focus for very many authority auditors. And as a result, this is a significant risk. We've also identified another risk, which is a new risk in the year for the authority. And this is not a significant risk, but it's where there's a possibility of material misstatement. And that is the new system. And this is your data migration due to your financial statements system upgrade to the cloud. This is the Unit 4 system. So because you've had this system upgrade partway through the year, we do consider this could be a risk due to error, possibly. So it's a system upgrade rather than a new system, so we don't consider it to be a significant risk. So those are the significant risks which we've covered. Pete has covered our approach to materiality. There was just one more point I wanted to touch on that, which is that we do set a lower materiality threshold for those senior officer remuneration balances within the accounts. And that lower materiality threshold is £20,000, which we need to bring to the attention of those charged with governance. Other than that, I will take the report as read, and if there are any questions, we're happy to answer those.
Can I just propose a clarification to your report and some extra information? You talked about Unit 4, and I don't think members here will realise that Unit 4 is actually parallel to Aggresso, and what the importance of Aggresso is to the combined authority. Could somebody give a quick definition of that, please?
So Aggresso is the financial statement system. So in effect, it is how the financial team record every transaction. So it's of paramount importance. It is the system that holds the numbers that make up the statement of accounts and holds the financial information of the authority. So very important to us, hence the risk rating on that one.
Thank you. Now we'll take questions. Councillor Simon, I believe you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Just to comment on journals first. My previous authority lost £500,000 from theft due to journal fraud by a finance officer. So it's really important we pick up on that. But what I wanted to comment on was pension liability. Yes, and noting that I'm chair of the Avon Pension Committee, yes, it's a large amount of money, but the pension fund is audited, as it happens, by Grant Thornton, and it does seem to me that much more reliance should be placed in the audit planning on tight auditing of the pension fund, and then some sort of certificate. We've got 400 employers. If they're all duplicating work, it's potentially expensive. I'm a member now of the Scheme Advisory Board for the Local Government Pension Scheme. So I'm thinking that I'll probably bring this up through that channel and perhaps with the local audit office. But I just want to place on record that I think that potentially this is highly duplicative work. It also turns up on the Baines audit, where the auditor audits herself effectively.
Chair, if I could initially respond, and then I'm sure Pete would possibly have a couple of comments as well. So it is important to note that as part of the work we do on this liability, we do place assurance on the audit of Avon Pension Fund. So we write a letter to the Avon Pension Fund auditor, and we seek reliance in terms of both the controls surrounding the validity and accuracy of the membership data, the contributions data, and the benefits data sent to the actuary by the pension fund. The important thing to note is that the pension liability assessment is based on a number of assumptions made then by the actuary beyond that point. So that can include things like the discount rate, the life expectancy of members, the future salary and benefit increases, and those assumptions are very sensitive. And as a result, due to the size of the underlying numbers and that inherent sensitivity, that while there is reliance placed on the pension fund and a letter sent to them and responses received, there is additional work to be done as a result of that, if that helps clarify.
But the assumptions made by the fund actuary are also reviewed by the government actuary. So there's, and by PwC acting for the government actuary. There's a lot of duplicative work, I think, in this sector.
Noted. Councillor Drew.
Can I concur with Toby that I'm a member of the pension fund as well, and it does seem to be either generating a lot more work that you can bill for us, or you perhaps take it on board the work done by the other sections of your organisation and double bill. I think this seems to be unnecessary amount of work. I don't see why you should make actuarial guesses better than the pension fund, which is working very hard to try and be accurate. It seems to be unnecessary.
Thank you, Councillor Drew. Councillor Coombs and then Councillor Hucker.
Thank you. Well, I was also on the Avon Pension Fund, but I'm not going to mention that.
Peter wanted to come back in on that.
Sorry, Chair, I'm sorry to get across you, Councillor. So, I mean, just to respond to that. So, the approach that we adopt at Grant Thornton, and we do 180 of the 500 councils and local government bodies out there, is absolutely consistent with all the other firms within the sector, and has been designed to address commentary and feedback from the regulator in terms of the coverage that we undertake within the public sector, and ultimately our internal quality management arrangements as well. Because when I come to sign those accounts, I want to have the confidence that I have enough evidence on file to be able to justify and support, should I be reviewed, those disclosures. So I am comfortable that we are adopting as an efficient approach as possible to getting assurance over the IAS 19 and the IFRIC 14, which I won't go into detail about either, but it's an added complexity that's arisen in recent years given the improved performance of some of the funds. I am comfortable that we are auditing proportionately, and that the way that we work with the pension fund auditors ensures that we are avoiding duplication where possible.
Can I just follow up and ask, where have you come to different opinions to the pension fund auditors in other authorities?
So I have found lots of differences in lots of IAS 19 disclosures over many years. Admittedly, the large majority, but not exclusively, are timing issues, recognising that when an authority produces its accounts, it will have information from the pension fund based on their estimate of the value of their investments held at a point in time during the course of the audit. And some of these audits take very many months. As you can imagine, clarity emerges and further accuracy emerges on some of those investments, and the numbers change. And as auditors, we will go back out and we will vouch and look to triangulate some of those values. They do move, and there are often differences, and quite large differences in many cases.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Coombs, would you like to restart your question, please?
Thank you. Yes, not about pensions. It's about governance. So pages 100 and 101, or 18 and 19 of your report. It takes a little bit of reading across those. So the a risk about governance has been identified, but in the previous year's report, 24-25, which is the next item on this agenda, you were able to close down a lot of those risks. Apparently, and I'm inferring, perhaps you could spell it out, because the former Mayor Dan Norris is no longer in office, that a lot of the governance risk seems to depart with him. And yet we did have a public statement today, which seemed to be about governance, but that was closed down by the chair in consultation with the senior officers sat next to him. So is it just because Dan Norris has gone, governance isn't a problem, or is it there was an interaction with other senior officers who are still in post? So can you tell us how governance will be assessed in this audit?
So and I think I alluded to this in my introduction for VFM, in undertaking the VFM work, we're required to, so VFM means lots of things to lots of people, but for us, it's based on the NAO code, National Audit Office. 3 areas we look at: financial sustainability, governance, and the 3 E's. So we will look at all of those 3 areas in some detail every year. But as you would expect, we focus on the areas of risk. And what we've done in this part of this plan is reference the findings from the prior year, 24-25. And whilst the findings in 24-5 were complementary about the direction of travel, particularly in the area of governance within the combined authority, you will note that the rating last year was red. So we actually concluded in 24-25 that the governance arrangements were not effective at the combined authority. And we talked about a number of areas in detail. And as you say, it's covered in more detail in the next item. Clearly, as you would expect, we will be looking at those areas again in more detail, given that inadequate arrangement assessment in the prior year.
Councillor Harker.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Peter and Sophie, for the report. I've got a few questions, but hopefully you'll be able to deal with them quickly, because I know that we've got a lengthy agenda today and still a lot to get through. Yeah, in terms of progress against prior year audit recommendations, you mentioned about agency expenditure and unable to obtain third-party evidence. Can you remind me of what the issue is here, the type of agency expenditure?
This was a finding from the prior year, and I'm just conscious, of course, I wasn't the manager at that point, but I will base it on what I have reviewed on the prior file and what I've seen from the previous reports. So this is because for certain samples, we were not able to obtain third-party evidence, and this usually takes the form, I believe, of third-party spend letters. So we were able to see the internal workings from the finance team. We had the verbal discussions with those partners, but we didn't have those written confirmations. We were not able to get to a point where we could receive the written confirmations. So therefore, we did raise this as a control weakness. It's worth noting that we will consider progress on this as part of the audit that is now ongoing and that started last week. And we will bring an update on this issue to you as part of our audit findings report. So I think it would be a little bit too early to say whether or not this issue has been closed down, hence the in progress rating at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, my second question relates to the fees. There's a large increase in fees for 25-26 compared to 24-25, and I know that you don't set the fees, they're set by public sector audit appointments. I just wondered if an increase on this scale is something which is peculiar to WECA, or if such increases are being seen across the board in terms of public sector audits.
So as you say, Councillor, the fees are decided by public sector audit appointments. I mean, just for information, all fees or scale fees for all local government bodies are available on their website. I think from recollection, when I did look at it last, if you did an analysis of the dozen or so combined authorities, you were somewhere in the middle. And I actually think that if you look at the 25/6 scale fee, that is actually less than the actual fee that was incurred in the prior year. The scale fee was significantly less, you are correct, but there were significant additional fees that were incurred in 24/25. The majority of that related to the extra work that we did on value for money, because there was an awful lot of high risk areas of focus based on prior year findings before 24/25, including some statutory recommendations in there that we were able to remove for the first time. And you'll also be aware that the delay in me concluding the 24/25 audit was due to the fact that there were some outstanding communications from members of the public, which resulted in an objection that I had to consider and some matters brought to my attention. That's now been resolved, and I'll elaborate on that at the next item, but that incurred some significant additional fees as well, which brought the actual fees to a higher level than the proposed ones for 5/6. Clearly, from my point of view, if we're having to charge extra fees, it means we've encountered problems and extra challenges. I would much prefer to have a fee much closer to the scale, because it means it's been a very smooth audit, and that is my hope for this year.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, got a question on or a point really on item 9, independence considerations. In the report, you say that you're not aware of any former Grant Thornton partners or staff being employed or holding discussions in respect of employment by the authority as a director in a senior management role covering financial, accounting or control related areas. Of course, the chief executive of the authority, Stephen Peacock, he is a former Grant Thornton employee, and being chief executive, he's responsible for the whole organisation, including financial, accounting and control related areas. I would say that I am somewhat disappointed that Stephen no longer attends the audit committee meetings. I know that previously chief executives have attended audit committee meetings, but given that he is a former employee of Grant Thornton, do you think that's something that should be disclosed?
So clearly we are aware of that, and it has been considered, since Stephen took over that role. And under ethical standards, there is a period of time during which, if that individual has been a previous employee, we would have to explicitly set out the risk, the perceived risk or actual risk, and any mitigation. But given the significant period of time between his employment and the current audit year, it is not deemed necessary to disclose this. But I do recognise that if you read that in plain English, it probably could be changed to be a bit more explicit and clearer. But just to be very clear, we do not see the chief exec's previous employment with Grant Thornton as a independence risk for this audit.
Okay, thank you. And I've got one final.
One more, please, Jonathan.
Yeah, just I do realise we've got a long agenda. Actually, I'm happy to leave this one. Actually, to be honest, Chair. So
thank you.
How can we make
Councillor Coombs, you seem poised to answer us.
Yes. How can we ensure that Councillor Hucker's observation is actually included on the paper record, that the chief executive of this authority was an employee of Grant Thornton, even though the paper from Grant Thornton said that there was no relationship?
It's on the minutes of this meeting, I presume. And if you
record, yeah.
And if you checked his LinkedIn page, it's there as well.
But if you were to just read the audit proposal, then Grant Thornton are on record saying the opposite.
Peter?
So I am happy when I come back to report later in the year via our audit findings report, or ISA 260, to be more explicit in that response, because I am required once again at the end of the audit to explicitly declare our independence.
That would be good, I think, please. sorry, this report is again for noting. So I'll note that the Audit Committee has noted this report. Thank you very much, Peter. So let's move on to item 15, which is the West of England Combined Authority's final Auditor's Annual Report for the year ending 31st of March 2025. And I think, Peter, you're in the frame for this one as well.
Me again, I'm afraid. So yes, the last of our 3 items. So audit is a retrospective exercise, but we are now going back 1 year further. So we're now going back to 24-25. And you'll be aware that the majority of our work was completed almost 10 months ago now in our 2 areas of responsibility. In terms of the value for money findings, the value for money work that we do is reported in the Auditor's Annual Report. And this document is the final Auditor's Annual Report for 24-25. It is here for information only because an earlier version of this report was brought to this committee in September 2025, and there was a considerable discussion on the content. I did at that juncture say that I couldn't finalise it because of those objections and communications from members of the public that I've had to consider. We have spent some time considering those in a lot of detail. That has involved the use of our own legal advisors to arrive at those judgments, and having considered the issues raised and reflected on the narrative within that Auditor's Annual Report and the commentary around governance in particular, I am comfortable that there was not a need to make any revisions to the narrative within that report or make any further supplementary recommendations, or for that matter, invoke any of my statutory powers. And on that basis, I issued it as a final a couple of months ago and signed off the certificate a few months ago confirming closure of the 24-25 audit. And therefore, for completeness, this report is coming as a final document and should be made available on your website for stakeholder information. So once again, Chair, happy to take any questions, but this report has been seen and discussed at length.
Thank you, Peter. Does anybody want to ask any quick clarifications, please? For Simon and then Councillor Hooker.
I'm aware that there are difficulties about confidentiality about public objections, but are we able to say anything? Are you able to say anything about what area the public objections dealt with and whether any of them were upheld?
So you are right, there is a confidentiality issue here. I think it's fair to say that they broadly fell up within a number of the areas outlined within the governance section of the Auditor's Annual Report. And there were no, as I said, no additional concerns over and above those raised in the original document that made a series of recommendations given our red rating on governance, but once again contextualised from the direction of travel that I felt was necessary given that further consideration.
Councillor Simon, you wanted to make any more? You're done. Okay. Councillor Coombs, considering you weren't at the September meeting, please keep your clarifications quick.
Yes. All right. I'll stick to things which have happened subsequently. So, if the complaints from the public were such that it took 10 months to investigate, you needed legal advice, surely that suggests that there was something serious enough to warrant reporting. If it was easily dismissed, you wouldn't have needed to spend so much time and put lawyers onto it.
I think these were very complicated matters that required further investigation. So there were issues within there that if were proven would raise concerns and would warrant further consideration of me exercising my statutory powers. And therefore it was appropriate for me to give them sufficient consideration before arriving at my conclusion. And they are complex and they involved meeting with a number of individuals within this organisation numerous times. And, you know, it's been a lot of resource on our side and on the side of the combined authority, document review and third parties, because once you get into the realm of statutory powers, there are all sorts of ramifications. And therefore, as you would suspect, from an auditor point of view, we want to make sure we're absolutely watertight in our judgments. And we will, in that situation, seek out external legal advice where appropriate. And just to pick up on the 10 months, I don't think it was 10 months, but it was a period of time, a significant period of time, and it just reflects the complexity and the lead in time, because there is, in those cases, lots of quality assurance within the firm.
Thank you. Any more clarifications that people want to make? Councillor Harker.
Yeah, just a quick one, and it is something which you might remember I highlighted back in September. In the report, you say that the exit payments were deemed to be reasonable in context, although it does appear that the exits were not based on performance grounds. So I would just be interested to know why you think that those payments were reasonable in context, and the reason for those departures.
So this is me now trying to recall the detail from the work that was undertaken some 11 months ago. But clearly, in terms of considering those payments, we have reflected on all the evidence provided from officers and the detailed documentation that we've seen, including business cases. Now, clearly, not all that information is readily available to individuals outside of the organisation. We've considered them, and on balance, we've made a judgment that is not, and once again, is concluding on balance that judgment you've referred to. But just to be very clear, that the exit packages and our reference to value for money has informed the overall judgment that we made, amongst other issues as well, in arriving at our VFM judgment for 4.5, which was that arrangements are inadequate.
Thank you. So I think we can move to say that we are noting that report, and move on to item 16, which is the quarterly corporate risk register update. And Abby Evans will be presenting this one, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. So this paper presents the updated corporate risk register for Audit Committee's consideration. And before highlighting the individual risk changes, I would like to draw attention to the progress made in strengthening the MCA's risk management arrangements following this committee's endorsement earlier this year. So the refreshed corporate risk framework was formally approved by Main Committee in June, and that updated framework provides a stronger foundation for strategic risk management, including clearer risk categories, an updated approach to risk appetite, improved escalation triggers, and the introduction of opportunity risk. So work is now underway to embed these changes across the organisation, and I hope that the committee will be able to see those benefits reflected in the next quarter's report. The corporate risk register continues to capture the most significant risks that could affect the delivery of the MCA's strategic objectives. And as part of this review, every corporate risk has been reviewed and refreshed and rescored where appropriate. The overall position remains positive, with all corporate risks currently assessed as manageable following mitigation. There are two notable improvements: the removal of CRR 17, the performance and project management risk, from the corporate risk register following strengthened controls and sustained reduction in residual risk, and the reduction of CRR 14, the CRSTS delivery risk, which reflects the increased confidence in delivery, stronger governance arrangements, and greater certainty over funding and timescales through to 2029. The CRR 14 risk entry on page 193 contains an incorrect pre-mitigation score following a late amendment. So the correct score is as shown in the top register, and the narrative, it's 15 at pre-mitigation and 10 post-mitigation. So the narrative and high-level summary are correct. It doesn't affect the overall risk position or conclusions presented in this report, but I apologise for that inconsistency and will ensure that minor correction is updated in the minutes. So overall, these positive developments are balanced by an increase in the assessed significance of CRR 6, so the global instability risk, recognising the continued geopolitical and economic pressures and the potential impact on affordability of our funding and programme delivery. Following discussion with CLT, there are a couple of other changes, and the Mayor also reviews these risks, and further refinements have been made to risk CRR5, the fund in real terms reduction investment funding risk, and CRR10, the workforce capacity and capability risk. These changes do not reflect any increase in the underlying level of risk, but provide a clearer articulation of the strategic challenges facing the organisation. In addition, CRR19 has been reframed to better recognise the opportunity associated with achieving established strategic authority status ahead of the full implementation of our new opportunity risk framework later this month. So overall, the updated register provides a balanced reflection of the MCA's current strategic risk profile, recognising where effective controls have reduced exposure while ensuring that the emerging external and organisational pressures continue to receive the appropriate attention that they need. So the committee is invited to note that register, and happy to take any questions, comments and requests for clarification.
Councillor Coombs.
Thank you for that presentation. There's an interesting juxtaposition between these two papers of what the external auditors think are our two key risks and what our internal resource has put on the risk register, and they're not the same, are they?
No. So for the risks that you see in the corporate risk register are a snapshot of the top level risks that could threaten the combined authority's core objectives and operations. We have a vast portfolio of other high level risks that the corporate leadership team oversee with risk ownership. So the risks that were reflected earlier in the internal audit report are captured, identified, assessed and managed, but you may not see them on this shorter, it's usually under 10 risks for the corporate risk register. If these risks change and they exceed our risk tolerances through the escalations that set out in our framework, then you may see those rise to this corporate risk register for this viewing. But the risks are there, identified and managed, but not necessarily in this particular snapshot.
But as an example, just over the last few months, your team has looked at the risk of poor quality performance and project management of CRSTS and said that that's improved to such an extent it's no longer on the corporate risk register, whereas the external auditors are looking at that and saying this is a key threat that they're going to be investigating in this year's audit.
Sorry, CRSTS risk is on there. It is on the corporate risk register. That's CRR 14. That is still a significant risk that is on our corporate risk register being managed by the Transport Directorate.
Any more questions? Well, Councillor Chabalala and then Jennifer Whitten.
Yes, thank you very much, and good kind of timing with the previous presentation. I just want to focus on work in terms of governance and also workforce culture. There's quite a number of mitigations in place, and as we also heard from in terms of the monthly extraction, in terms of from any investment, obviously when you find a fluctuation of recruitment and we get to a point where there's more retention and the pension costs and so forth, there's an ongoing uncertainty of the numbers. So how can we have better awareness of the workforce culture adjustments and changes, and both in terms of senior management, the diversity, how can we get a better flow of that? Because if you have a talent gap, let's say you are 100 staff short, you recruit those 100 staff, there's going to be an issue over there. There's going to be an issue with, so at what pace are you trying to resolve that?
So our risks are managed lively. We have monthly and, if necessary, more frequent review of risks. The risk that you're talking about is captured within CRR 10, yes. Workforce and capability. So that has direct workforce implications, reflecting our need to attract, retain and develop the capability that is required to deliver our strategic priorities, particularly during this period of organisational changes you've identified. So we are working through the implementation of the target operating model. Our HR team and CLT closely review this risk at a regular basis, and the OIP programme itself provides a structured framework for managing workforce related risks. So through our own organisational design, workforce planning and talent acquisition and learning and development, we've got that engagement activity. So there are a number of mitigation actions which you can see in the detailed risk itself. But we are constantly horizon scanning and looking for new risks, but the authority continues to monitor that workforce capacity and capability issue around, particularly during this period of organisational change.
Yes, so whilst understanding that there isn't a set dashboard, I think it would be quite interesting to understand the level of talent retention and people coming in or going, like what is the flow of that? What is the level of consistency within that? Because that actually then tells us more about the culture, because right now we're hearing about the culture and the risk assessment, but without really understanding the exit and how long people are staying on the job, then we can't really see how severe the issue is. So I think I'm lacking that awareness of, to really understand your risk on both senior management, middle management, lower tier. What is that workforce flow that's affecting?
We are getting statistics on that. There's been an improvement which links to the previous risk, which was removed from the corporate risk range on performance and oversight, because we've got developing dashboards that provide statistics on that information that are presented to CLT. So I'm not the risk owner, so I won't be able to give you detail.
So,
we can get some clarification from the HR team about.
Can you let me take this one away and take it to the head of HR, who's not available today?
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Whitten.
Thanks. I was looking at the risks in the corporate risk register. I was wondering if AI had been considered as part of your horizon scanning. I sit on a few audit committees, and I've seen in the past year or so many other authorities in the sector are adding AI onto their risk registers.
Yes, so the AI risk, there is a risk that's been identified at directorate level for our governance and our digital and data risk register. So there is a risk identified and assessed and monitored, and our newly released digital and data strategy has a flow of work relating to that and how we will manage those protocols for staff going forward as well. It hasn't escalated to the point where it needs to be on the corporate risk register, so you're not seeing it in this report, but there is a risk identified being actively managed by the organisation around our role in AI and communicating that with staff and the risks associated with artificial intelligence use and information.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
Thank you. I have a question relating to CRR8, which is about climate and nature and the risk of basically not being able to deliver on the duties and so forth. Back in November of 2025, there was a national emergency briefing to members of Parliament, which made it clear that, from their point of view, climate risks were very substantial and should be treated as a national emergency. And one of the recommendations was for very much greater engagement with the public, to raise awareness amongst the public about the significance of the risk. Will WECA be doing anything itself to engage much more with members of the public, as that could very substantially reduce the risk of it not being able to implement the plans that it and achieve the outcomes that it aims to achieve?
So the risk CRR8 at the moment focuses on embedding that, consistently applying those climate and nature objectives into our work. There'll be a whole programme of activities and projects related to that across particularly this Transport and Place Directorate. It's owned across both directorates. And that will indeed include engagement through the individual projects and programmes with the local residents. That is key to our work. I haven't got the detail behind those individual things because they will be separate depending on what programme or project. We did come with a paper to Audit Committee previously that provided further detail on CRI and the work and activities that sit below that. So we can recirculate it because it did include an annex of related work, and we can, if further information is needed on the communication engagement with the public, we can provide that.
If I may, the National Emergency Briefing was in November of last year, but its publication in the form of a film with excerpts from the National Emergency Briefing came out in April of this year, so it's relatively recent. So would that feature in previous
That's roughly the time we went with the paper, but we can, it may not address that point specifically. So we'd need to revisit with what we had, and we can talk to the risk owners and come back to you to see if there's a further clarification needed.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. No, I think we need to move on because I need to make just one more clarification, Sibs. On Appendix 1, it'd be really useful to have a trending column to show status of each individual risk. And if we could have that in future meetings, that'd be really good. So I'd like to say that we're going to note this report, please.
One, please, Chair.
One very quick one, please.
Yes, thank you. Just back on the CRR8 and the spatial plan, as most local authorities will be looking at the new local plans at the moment, what is the timeline to ensure that the combined authorities actually in alignment and leading on that? Because then it may affect land allocation of sites and so forth, which would then also affect funding streams and meeting public expectations on housing. Is there some progress on that, and is there a specific timeline?
Can we come back to you with progress clarification? I'm not the risk owner, so I want to make sure that we can convey correctly the right information. We can share that with members following this meeting.
No problem. Thank you.
So let's consider this report noted, please. And let's move on to item 17, which is the health and safety update. To provide Audit Committee with an update on health and safety performance across the MCA for 25-26, together with plans for continuous improvement during 26-27. And Nicola Rose will be presenting this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicola Rose. I'm the Head of Health and Safety for the West of England Combined Authority. I will be going through the progress made since the last update, as well as noting the reduction of overall risk, and pick out just a few of what we've got planned for next year, or the rest of this year, next year. Last summer, we were able to report that we had closed out the actions from the Health and Safety Improvement Plan, and we moved towards a more continuous improvement state, having already at that time achieved reasonable assurance status. During 2025, our performance was good. We had no injuries, diseases or dangerous occurrences which felt reportable to the Health and Safety Executive under RIDOR, which is an acronym which means Reporting of Injuries, Diseases and Dangerous Occurrences Regulations. That meant that we had or continue to have an accident frequency rate of 0. We had 6 non-lost time injuries, 1 incident causing damage, and we had 48 hazard reports, which is a doubling of our target of 24 in a year. This proactive hazard reporting is an important tool to help us reduce accidents and demonstrates a strong health and safety reporting culture. The achievements are listed out in Section 8 of the Health and Safety Report, but just to pick out a few. In February, the Chief Executive signed the new Health and Safety Policy Statement, which demonstrates an ongoing commitment to health and safety performance at the Combined Authority. We've continued to work with project teams to support the construction design management regulations process. We delivered an elected members awareness session. And we had Councillor Wilcox that gave some really good questions, so thank you for that. Unfortunately, we did have quite a low turnout on that. But we're willing to run another session for new members or anyone else that was unable to make it and would like to come to a future session. We carried out a programme of audit sampling across various functions across the combined authority, and we continue to do that. Davis House improvements included training, building improvements, and job safety analysis. We undertook a substantial fire safety improvement programme. We worked on various initiatives, including display screen equipment initiatives to support the reasonable adjustment process. We also introduced a pilot for safer driving to reduce our occupational road risk, and that's going to be rolled out across the rest of the organisation in due course. Next steps, we're rolling out a new statutory and mandatory training model, which is more bespoke to what we do as an organisation. The previous training was good, but it was a little bit generic, so we want to do something that's very, very specific to what we're doing here. We now have, we're using .digital to capture building-related issues in the same way that we do specific health and safety issues, so we will start to report on those. We also have mandatory CDM awareness training starting at the beginning of September. CDM, sorry, that's Construction Design Management Regulations. We're also doing some significant work around our business continuity processes and plans. We've had several workshops. We've had a CLT workshop, and also we've been having meetings with heads of service to strengthen that process. One of the other things that we really want to start to do in line with current health and safety executive campaigns and initiatives is to do more around psychosocial risks, stress management and things like that. And we'll be working very closely with HR on that. We are also currently in the process of being audited by One West, so we should be able to report back at the next audit committee on the findings and recommendations from that. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Abby, for your report and your explanation of acronyms. It's very useful. Councillor Coombs and Councillor Lee.
Thank you. Now, we are mostly politicians and money people in the room, but if you look at what WECA does, we're a construction company, aren't we? We spend hundreds of millions of pounds building things, and construction is the most dangerous industry to work in Britain. 25 people died in construction last year. So is this report covering our contractors?
To some extent, yes. So we do have control of contractor processes where we have where we look at the onboarding selection criteria for our contractors where we have projects. But I think it's the really important distinction is that we are essentially delivering very little at the moment in terms of the requirements of the CDM regulations. So under those regulations, you have what's called a client, and where we are client, we will have those processes in place. But for the vast majority of the projects that we have going on, we are funder. Therefore, we're not classed as the client for the purposes of the CDM regulations. That sits with the grant recipient, which would usually be the unitary authority. And those responsibilities, and there are lots of processes around this, but the responsibilities under the CDM regulations actually lie with the unitary authority, although we do work very closely and we do have processes in place that's where that responsibility sits.
So what WECA does as a funder is it has reduced money available, and it has set a very hard cliff edge for when money needs to be spent, projects need to be finished. Is that conducive to a safe construction site if there's a hard deadline and a squeezed budget?
So could you just repeat that question, please?
As funder, which we are, WECA has reduced the amount of money available for projects. It's set a hard deadline for when the money needs to be spent by, otherwise it gets taken away. Is that the kind of workplace that you think would result in the safe delivery of a construction project?
So I think that sort of sits outside of my remit here. But we do, I was going to say, but we do have explicit wording in our funding agreements, and unitary authorities will apply for that funding based on.
Nicola, do you want me to help you out a second? So, firstly, the funding, the timing for the funding is not a constraint that we put out there. That's central government timings. And the second thing is we've not actually reduced any of the budgets for any of the large capital programs or projects, as far as I'm aware. If you can give me specific examples where we've done so.
Yeah, as a member of the Bristol Transport Committee, it has been our observation that going from an initial budget, which was said you might be able to spend this, to the confirmed budget, or actually you will be given this, it's meant that the authorities have had to constrain their aspirations because there is less available. That feels like a budget cut.
I mean, again, to the best of my knowledge, there are no specific schemes that have had a specific reduction in their allocation. I think there are schemes where there have been examples where scope has increased, the cost of those projects has increased, but that doesn't necessarily translate to being a budget cut. The amount of money is still the same. Obviously, if you can provide specific examples, I may be wrong because it's difficult for me to be on top of every single project and where the budgets have got, but a large number of projects have got increased budgets because we recognise there have been constraints that are outside of individual unitary authorities' control.
Yeah, and I'd just like to reiterate that the responsibility, the legal responsibility for health and safety on those projects where the grant recipient is the client, sits with the client.
Thank you. Well, I'll just wrap up my point and no further questions. But if the attitude of WECA is that safety is about legal responsibility and not who is creating the risk, then I think that we could improve quite considerably in our consideration of health and safety.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Coombs. Councillor Leach, I believe you wanted to come in, and then
Thank you, Chair. We had a red heat alert recently. I think we can expect to get more of them, and that the temperatures might get more severe. How do you feel about the risk of heat to our employees, both those in offices and those out in the field, and how well positioned is WECA to look after the health and safety of our employees?
Okay, so internally we did do a risk assessment and we did communicate with our employees, and we put various mitigation measures in place, both for events site and for our buildings. It is to some extent, longer term, it's to some extent a BCP question. Outside of the West of England Combined Authority offices that I'm responsible for, again, we would all within the unitary authorities have responsibility for our own employees working in our offices. Thank you.
Councillor Shabalala, make it quick, please.
Yes, just to go back on the point from Councillor Coombs. I think it should be just good due diligence to have better oversight of both elements, the granted elements and the contractual elements, just so we can see the difference of both and understand that from the wider combined authority perspective, rather than just looking at the contractual. It feels like there's a huge risk that we may not be aware of should the funding element not be there anymore and you only just contracting, then you'll start to find a new situation. Rather we have hindsight of it now than not at all.
Thank you. I will endeavour to provide another update in our December committee.
Thank you. So we have 3 recommendations which we should note, which smells almost like we should be voting on them because they're quite specific, but still. This audit committee notes the significant progress made across all areas of the health and safety management throughout MCA activities in 25-26. And number 2, notes the material reduction in overall risk achieved through the delivery of robust and targeted risk mitigation measures. And point 3, notes the ongoing and planned programme of continuous improvement in health and safety performance for 26-27. So is everybody happy to know those? Yes? Thank you. I'd like to propose that we take a 5-minute comfort break. Is that accessible to everybody, considering it's 5 to 1 and we'll be going since 10:30?
But you finish at 1.
Yeah.
You finish at 1.
We get a hard stop at 1, do we? Yeah. So we do have one for voting, to at least 3 more significant items to go to the meeting today. We're not going to fit that in 5 minutes. Should I propose an adjournment and come back to it? If we have a hard stop at 1 o'clock?
I mean, Chair, it depends whether members have to are happy to stay or whether they need to go on for other commitments, whether we can continue to be quorate.
Councillor Leach.
I will need to leave at 1 o'clock. I do have an appointment back in Baines that I need to take to.
Adult social care at 2 o'clock today. So
good luck.
Yes.
Okay, so we're not going to be able to do due diligence on these particular items. So I'm going to propose that we adjourn this meeting and return it to it at some point. Councillor Simon.
Chair, rather than adjourn the meeting, maybe we could defer the 2 items, which are information items, to the next meeting and just move to the forward work plan and have a quick look at the forward work plan.
You have a vote item we do need to vote on, which is the information governance update, those, Councillor Simon.
We could deal with that one immediately, Chair. That would mean that we could approve those frameworks now if members have got time.
So we're not having a comfort break. Shall we move to item 18? Can we do due diligence in 3 minutes, is the question. I suspect not, in my opinion.
Could you clarify whether this is, what does endorse mean? Does the committee own the output of this paper, or is it asked to note it?
So we're asking the committee to support this or endorse it. If you wish any changes to be made, then obviously you can take that opportunity through this process.
So page 207 says it's about for consideration and approval. So it is something that can be approved or rejected by this body.
If you wish to reject it, then you're free to do so. We'll bring an alternative if that's what members are minded to do.
If we're going to lose 2 members of the committee, that takes us out of choracy. Mr. Addison?
I also have to leave to get back to work, so I can stay for a few minutes, but as you say, this is quite a large item and proper consideration may be a bit of a problem.
So it's 15 minutes suitable for this meeting? I don't think so, because it's quite meaty.
I do need to leave, and I need to leave within the next minute.
I'm going to propose that we adjourn then and come back at some other point, or would this be added on to another meeting?
Chair, if the committee wishes to adjourn, then we'll find another suitable date and ask people to come back and complete the business that's on this agenda. So it'll be specifically for that, and it will only be dealing with these items that remain outstanding.
Can I have a seconder for that, please? 2 seconders, Councillor Leach and Councillor Hudson. So I'm take it that we are going to adjourn the meeting as of item 18 to item 18. So we'll come back to that. Okay.
Date to be set by consultation with yourself, Chair.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for attending. Stay cool and have some lemonade. Thank you.